This video gives an outline of the etching process. It's one of the many techniques used to create hand-pulled prints. In this case, we are using a zinc plate. The process begins with beveling the edges of the plate and then polishing it, starting with still wool and working up to final polish with brasso. The entire plate is then coated with asphaltum, a water and acid resistant ground that basically seals the plate from etching. Here shows my original drawing being traced and transferred onto the plate. Because you're printing directly from the plate, the image must be flipped so it will print as intended. By using tracing paper to make a copy of the image, it can be turned over and traced through to the plate. By rubbing Conte on a sheet of paper to create homemade carbon paper as shown here, it can be used to transfer the image easily onto the plate. Once the entire image has been transferred, you're ready to go to the next step. At this point, you can start scribing the image into the plate. Asphaltum is referred to as a ground or stop-out varnish. Although it dries to a hard finish, it can still be manipulated without chipping. By using an etching needle shown here with carbide steel tips, the image can be easily scribed through the ground without applying too much pressure. The beauty of using something like asphaltum is if an error is made while scribing the image onto the plate, it is easily corrected by painting asphaltum over top the error. It's also important to pay attention to the edges and corners of your plate. While working on it, the asphaltum can get rubbed off, so once you are finished scribing the plate, it's best to take the time to touch up any corners and edges. Here the plate has been put into the acid bath made up of 12 parts water to 1 part nitric acid. The acid will form bubbles on any exposed areas of the zinc plate, so here you see me knocking the bubbles off with a fine brush. This allows the plate to etch more evenly. At this point, the plate was only in the acid for about a minute, just enough to give a fine etch. Here the plate is out of the acid and being washed off with Varsol. Once I have the plate clean as good as I can, I degrease it with soap and water and talcum powder. Here shows the fine lines left by the etch. I will use them for a guide for the rest of the process. When the plate is in the nitric acid, any areas that are exposed will etch. There are several different grounds or mediums that can be used to mask out the acid from etching the plate. Now it's ready for the next step. The dark areas shown have been stopped out so they don't etch. On the remaining open parts of the plate, I'm spraying diluted asphaltum using an airbrush. This creates a dot structure that adheres to the plate, referred to as an aquatint. When put in the acid, it will eat between all the dots, creating different tones when the plate is printed. With the acid mixed 12:1, the plate would be left in 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how deep you wanted the etch to be. You can see here I've added stop out to more areas of the plate, etching the plate once again. I will repeat this process several times, redrawing on the plate as I go. This will create different tones as deeper etched areas will hold more ink. Note that I'm working in reverse. All the dark areas on the plate will print white and all the open areas will print black or have darker tones. Basically, I'm working in the negative. I'm again stopping out more areas on the plate that I don't want to etch any further. The longer the plate etches, the darker the aquatint will be when it is printed. And back in the acid once again for a deeper bite in the exposed part of the plate. From there, I will again wash the plate with Varsol and use soap and water to degrease it. I can again start working on the tree trunks and the detail of the plate. I will also be making 3 additional plates that will add color to the final print. Now I'm using a grease pencil to stop out areas, creating detail before spraying aquatint once again. As I said before, it will form a dot structure on the plate, only allowing the acid to etch between the dots. I'll etch the plate for about 10 more minutes. After cleaning the plate again with Varsol and washing it with soap and water, it is ready to print the first proof. I'm inking up the etching plate and preparing it for printing. I'm using oil-based ink and I'm carting it onto the plate. By doing this, the ink is pushed into the etched areas. A starched cheesecloth known as tarlatan is then used to wipe the ink from the surface of the plate, with the weave of the stiff material grabbing the excess ink, yet leaving it behind in the etched areas. The plate is wiped in sequence, starting with the previously used tarlatan. The black one I use here to the clean tarlatan, the white one. For the final wipe of the plate, I use phone book pages. They work well to remove the ink residue on the surface of the plate. These are the areas that I don't want to print and appear white on the final. It is also important the edges of the plate are cleaned, and then the plate is ready to go to press. And finally, to pull the first proof and transfer the image to 3 additional plates. 100% rag paper is used, and here I'm using proof paper. The paper is soaked in water and the excess has been blotted off. This allows the ink to better adhere to the paper and the paper to be pliable enough to go into the grooves of the etching without damaging or tearing. I've covered the press bed with clear mylar to which I mark the corners of the plate. All the additional color plates will register to the same corner marks. Once I've run the first ink plate through the press, I keep one end of the paper securely tucked under the press roller and replace the ink plate with a clean one. This allows me to work from the image transferred to create color plates. I have repeated this 3 times, preparing 3 additional plates to add color to the print. My next step is etching those plates and the first proof. Now that the image has been transferred, we are able to work on the additional plates. The 2 shown here will add green and light brown. As explained previously, the exposed areas on the plate etch when put in the acid bath, and the dark brown stopped out areas remain white when printed. More detail was added to the color plates to give depth to the image. To get this effect, I etched each plate several times. Here shows all the final plates ready to print. Dark brown, green, light brown, and yellow. Now I'm inking the 4 plates for printing, again including the dark brown plate, green, light brown, and yellow plates. The same process I used to print the proof is used when preparing each plate to print the final edition. As shown, this includes carting the ink onto the plate, wiping the excess ink off each plate with tarlatan, again picking up the surface ink but leaving the ink in the etched areas behind. As before, the final wipe is done with telephone book pages. I know this sounds odd, but it ensures any traces of surface ink are removed, allowing the non-etched areas to appear blank when printed. Next, the brown plate and then the yellow. I decided to add yellow, but I used a collagraph plate rather than an etching plate. It is another printing process, but although it is not being covered in this video, it is equally as fascinating. And finally, the first print of my edition. The plates are inked and ready to go. I start with the lightest color, so the first plate on the press is the yellow one. Higher quality 100% rag paper is used, soaked in water and blotted to remove any excess. This allows the paper to emboss into the grooves without ripping or sticking to the plate. When the felt blankets are pulled back, the edge of the paper is left tucked under the roller so the plate and the paper will not shift. Now that the yellow plate has gone through the press, it is replaced by the brown plate. This video has been edited, but it actually takes several minutes to position each plate on the press bed to ensure precise registration. This is the case in the prints in this edition, with a focus on making them all look exactly the same. The green plate is next to go on the press. The felt blankets you see being used give a cushion between the roller and the plate, as well as keeping the paper from moving. As I mentioned earlier, this video has been edited, but it actually takes approximately 2 hours to ink all the plates and run them through the press for each print of the edition. And last, the dark brown plate. Once in position, it makes the final pass through the press. And here's the finished print. For me as a printmaker, it's always exciting to see what exists within the plates and brings the entire image together. In my experience, the look and feel of a print is like no other, and is very satisfying to go through the process to produce. And here are the first 8 prints of my edition.